Imagine walking into a warm restaurant on a cold evening, holding the tiny hand of your child, hoping for nothing more than a simple meal together. Now, imagine being turned away, not because the food was gone, not because the tables were full, but because someone decided you didn't belong there. This is the story of James, a single father, and his little daughter Emma, a story of pain, courage, and an act of kindness that would change everything. The wind cut through the streets of a small town in the UK, the kind of wind that made families hurry indoors to steaming dinners and laughter echoing behind windows. James adjusted the zipper of Emma's worn jacket, trying to shield her from the chill. His hands were cracked from days of manual labor, odd jobs that barely paid, and tonight he wanted to give her something different. Emma's 7th birthday had been a week ago, and he still carried the guilt of not celebrating it properly. Tonight, he promised himself he would treat her to something she deserved, a meal at the nicest restaurant in town. Emma's eyes lit up when they approached the glowing sign of Hamilton's, the kind of place she'd only ever seen from the outside. The smell of roasted garlic and fresh bread seeped into the cold air, and she clutched his hand tighter. "Daddy, are we really going inside?" she whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. James forced a smile, hiding his nerves. He had enough in his pocket for a modest meal, nothing fancy, but to Emma, it would feel like a dream. Inside, the warmth wrapped around them instantly. Golden chandeliers, the clinking of glasses, and well-dressed couples made James acutely aware of his worn coat and scuffed boots. He led Emma to the front desk, where a young waiter glanced at them with a faint sneer. "Can I help you?" the waiter asked. His tone clipped. "Yes," James said politely. "A table for two, please." The waiter's eyes travelled down James's jacket, the old shoes, then to Emma's patched jeans. Something in his gaze hardened. "I'm sorry, sir, but we're fully booked tonight." James glanced past him. Half the tables sat empty. Confused, he asked, "Are you sure? We don't mind waiting." The waiter's lips curled into a smirk. "Sir, this establishment has a standard. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the diners down the street." Emma's little hand tightened in his, and James felt a sting of humiliation burn in his chest. He opened his mouth to respond, but the waiter had already turned his back. Around them, a few customers looked on, some with pity, some with judgment. James swallowed hard, fighting the urge to sink into the floor. He wanted to protect Emma from the shame, but she was old enough to understand. Her eyes glistened as she whispered, "Daddy, did we do something wrong?" Before James could answer, a commanding voice rang out from across the room. "What seems to be the problem here?" A tall man in his 60s, with silver hair and a tailored suit, strode forward. He was the restaurant's owner, Mr. Hamilton himself. Conversations hushed, and all eyes turned toward him. The waiter stiffened, stammering, "Sir, I was just explaining." "Explaining what?" Mr. Hamilton's voice was calm, but laced with authority. His sharp gaze flicked to James and Emma, then back to the waiter. "That you've decided who deserves to dine here and who doesn't. Is that what Hamilton's has become?" The waiter's face paled. James stood frozen, torn between gratitude and shame. He didn't want charity, he wanted dignity. Emma looked up at the older man with wide eyes, sensing something was about to change. Mr. Hamilton stepped closer to James and Emma, his voice softened. "Sir, my deepest apologies. You and your daughter are most welcome here. Please, allow me to personally show you to our best table." The entire restaurant watched as Mr. Hamilton pulled out a chair for Emma, treating her like royalty. She beamed, her earlier sadness melting into joy. James sat opposite her, still reeling from the humiliation, but overwhelmed by the owner's kindness. The waiter disappeared into the kitchen, shame written across his face. Menus were placed in front of them, but before James could protest about the prices, Mr. Hamilton raised a hand. "Tonight, your meal is on the house. Consider it a gift." James shook his head. "I can't accept that. I came here prepared to pay for my daughter's meal." Mr. Hamilton leaned closer, his eyes warm but serious. "Sometimes, sir, dignity isn't in what we pay for, but in what we accept with grace. Let your daughter enjoy tonight." Anna giggled as a waiter brought fresh bread to the table. For the first time in months, James saw her smile without worrying, and tears welled in his eyes. The restaurant buzzed again, but whispers floated through the air. Some diners praised Mr. Hamilton for his kindness, while others muttered judgments under their breath. James felt every glance, every word, but when Emma laughed over a bowl of warm soup, he decided none of it mattered. Mr. Hamilton checked on them several times, asking about Emma's favourite foods, telling her stories about his own children who had grown up in that very town. Emma listened with rapt attention, her face glowing in the candlelight. When dessert arrived, a small chocolate cake with a single candle, Emma clapped her hands in delight. "It's like my birthday all over again," she exclaimed. James's throat tightened as Mr. Hamilton winked at him. "Every child deserves to feel special, don't you agree?" James nodded, unable to speak. He thought of the endless nights working late shifts, the struggles to keep the lights on, the times he'd skipped meals so Emma wouldn't have to. Tonight, for just a few hours, none of that mattered. As they left the restaurant, Mr. Hamilton walked them to the door. "James, was it?" he asked. James nodded, surprised he remembered his name. "You're raising a wonderful daughter. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small for that." James swallowed hard. "Thank you for everything. Don't thank me," Mr. Hamilton said softly. "Thank yourself for never giving up. But kindness never goes unnoticed, and neither does cruelty." The next morning, the story of what happened spread across the small town like wildfire. Some praised Mr. Hamilton's generosity, while others criticized James for taking advantage. Gossip has a way of twisting the truth, and James soon found himself the subject of whispers wherever he went. At the hardware store where James picked up shifts, a co-worker sneered, "Heard you got a free fancy dinner." Must be nice living off pity. James clenched his fists, but said nothing. He had promised himself long ago never to let anger dictate his actions. Emma was watching, always watching. One afternoon, as James walked Emma home from school, Mr. Hamilton's car pulled up beside them. "James," he called out, "I've been thinking. Would you consider working at the restaurant? We could use someone dependable like you." James froze. "Work at Hamilton's?" Mr. Hamilton smiled. "Yes, you'd earn an honest wage, and you'd never have to worry about being turned away again." The offer sounded like salvation, but James hesitated. Pride tugged at him. Was this just charity dressed as opportunity? But Emma's hopeful eyes told him what he needed to hear. "Daddy, maybe you could cook with the chefs. That would be so cool." James accepted. His first weeks were tough, long hours, demanding standards, and constant doubt from staff who still whispered about the charity case. But James proved himself with grit, honesty, and the quiet dignity that had carried him through every hardship. Emma visited often, sitting in a corner booth with her homework while her dad worked. Customers began to notice her, the little girl who inspired so much strength in her father. Soon, regulars asked to sit in James's section, drawn to his sincerity and kindness. One evening, a wealthy businessman came in, the same type who once looked down on James. This man mocked him openly, sneering at his past. But instead of anger, James served him with grace. Mr. Hamilton, watching from afar, later told him, "That is true strength, to rise above." Months passed. James climbed from dishwasher to server, then to assistant manager. His leadership inspired the staff, and Emma thrived, her confidence growing as she saw her father's perseverance pay off. On Emma's 8th birthday, the restaurant closed early for a private party, hosted by Mr. Hamilton himself. The staff, once skeptical, decorated the hall with balloons and a cake bigger than Emma had ever dreamed. For the first time, James didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like family. But life is never without trials. Mr. Hamilton fell ill, and whispers began about who would take over the restaurant. Competitors circled like vultures, waiting for the empire to crumble. James feared the man who had given him everything would see his legacy stolen. One night, Mr. Hamilton called James into his office. "You've been more than an employee," he said weakly. "You've been proof that this place is about more than fine dining. It's about people. Promise me, James, that you'll keep that alive." Tears filled James's eyes. "I promise." When Mr. Hamilton passed away, the town mourned. But in his will, he left a shocking surprise. James was entrusted with a share of the restaurant, with the responsibility of carrying on its mission of dignity and kindness. The same waiter who once turned James away came to him, humbled. "I was wrong," he admitted. "I judged you without knowing your story." James offered a hand instead of resentment. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do next. Under James's guidance, Hamilton's thrived. He introduced affordable community nights so struggling families could dine with dignity. He hired staff based not on appearances but on heart. The restaurant became more than a place to eat. It became a symbol of hope. Years later, Emma, now grown, stood in the very same restaurant, giving a speech to a crowd of families. "This place taught me that one act of kindness can change a life," she said, her voice steady. "My father walked in here once, broken and humiliated. But because someone believed in him, he found the strength to rise." And now, it's our turn to keep that light shining. The crowd erupted in applause, but James only looked at his daughter with tears in his eyes. For him, the true victory wasn't the restaurant, the respect, or the success. It was Emma's smile, radiant and unburdened. And so, from one cold night of humiliation came a lifetime of dignity, love, and a reminder: kindness has the power to rewrite someone's story forever.